The time now is 9 o'clock, and you are listening to me, Denise Headley, on the Headley Highlight Show with our exclusive interview with Gina Miller, the business owner and activist who has become extremely well known in recent years for challenging a number of decisions made by the British government, particularly in regard to the Brexit process. She has taken the government to court both under Theresa May and Boris Johnson and won twice. In August 2019, she was one of a number of parties to launch legal proceedings against the government for the prorogation of Parliament, claiming to do so was unconstitutional. A month later, the Supreme Court ruled unanimously that the prorogation was in fact unlawful. In September 2021, Gina announced the formation of a new political party called the True and Fair Party. Welcome, Gina, and thank you so much for taking part in this interview and being a guest on the Headley Highlight Show.
Well, hi, Denise. Lovely to be talking to you.
Thank you so much, Gina. So my very first question is, because I know that, as far as I'm concerned, I class you as an expert on Brexit. So I was wondering if you could just give me your thoughts on why the UK is trying to withdraw from the Northern Ireland Protocol, because we've had a lot of conversation about that recently in the press. So could you just give me your take? Because they're trying to put through legislation effectively, as I understand it, which is going to break the treaty, which is international law. So I'm coming from that perspective. What's your thoughts?
It's really complicated, but in a nutshell, it's all propaganda. I mean, the whole thing is the way they're dressing it up is that the NIP, it's called the Northern Ireland Protocol Bill, the NIP bill. They're saying it's all about Article 16, but actually Article 16, the protocol, Article 16 and the Northern Ireland Protocol already has in it a whole sequence and process of how you renegotiate. It's already there. All the mechanisms to renegotiate are already there in the bill or in the international treaty. So there is no need for this bill because Article 16 is a safeguarding clause to renegotiate, to make sure that there's not damage in the peace process. And also it sits alongside the Good Friday Agreement. So the two treaties go hand in hand to ensure peace in Ireland. And to say that you can't have, for example, you can't go before the European Court of Justice. Actually, in the Good Friday Agreement, they are a part of that treaty. So the whole thing is dressed up as propaganda, because I think my feeling is, having read the draft bill now, is that they're playing a game of deflecting, both from the real purpose of the act, and secondly, because it's reheating Brexit at a time when they're suffering politically. There's a lot of things going wrong for the Conservatives right now, and it's a great way of deflecting from that. But the most important thing about this bill, the NIP bill, is another clause is a clause they've actually put in it called Clause 22, which basically is a power grab. It gives the government and the executive prerogative powers, that's almost absolute powers, and to change the withdrawal agreement retrospectively and in future. This is a massive power grab. It has nothing to do with Article 16. I really feel that people need to read the bill and go beyond the propaganda and see exactly what this government is trying to do. It's the same playbook that they've done with the legislation that received royal assent on April the 28th about police powers, courts powers, voting in the street. I mean, this is another tranche of the power grabbing that this government are set on bringing upon our country, of eroding our rights right before our eyes. I say that rather than taking our rights by stealth, they're actually doing it by statute.
I know what you mean by, when you say a power grab, are they trying to effectively deneuter the democratic structures in that area so that they can have the majority of control? Because you've recently had elections and you've had a change at Stormont. So are they trying to effectively deneuter that process?
No, it's about the withdrawal treaty. It's about that treaty, the Brexit treaty that we signed. Okay. Because actually at the time, myself and lots of other people who are experts, constitutional experts, said that it was a very weak trade agreement. It had lots of what's called red flags in it. Okay. And I think the way they're trying to bring in this legislation is to address those red flags in it, because they know there's lots of things coming down the line that are not good. Because actually, the full effect of the withdrawal agreement hasn't come into play yet. because of COVID. We are sort of, we put things aside because we had to deal with COVID, both sides, the EU and us. And now the real issues on checks, administration, burdens, the real effect of that treaty are going to come in effect, and they don't like it. So what they're trying to do is overrule it by doing this bill in Parliament, which says we don't have to abide by what's in the withdrawal agreement. So they're trying to use domestic law, give themselves powers in domestic law to override an international treaty.
But what I don't understand is if you have domestic law and then you've got international treaty, the domestic law, presumably, in my humble opinion, isn't it subservient? So you can't use domestic law to override an international treaty. I mean, that's the same sort of thing that's happening with the Rwanda question because of the way in which people come here. They argue that the route, they criminalize the way in which people take the route here, and they use that as an argument. And to me, so isn't it the same sort of thing? You're trying to...
Yeah, they're trying to do that. There are two conflicts here, because constitutionally, if Parliament passes this bill, it will give the Prime Minister and the executive those powers to override an international treaty. So there is a conflict here between what Parliament's doing and what an international court can do. And I think what's more dangerous than that is that this signals that we have a government who do not respect international law. So when you come with, I mean, they've got the same thing going on with the WTO, because they've realized that when we left the EU, they thought we would be beholden unto ourselves and we didn't have to be answerable to anybody. And what they've realized now, for example, in bringing in steel tariffs or threatening to bring in steel tariffs, is that that would contravene the world, WTO trade agreement. So unfortunately, we do see the little bit of our sovereignty to become part of an international community and trade in the international community and be part of international treaties. And that's the way we work globally. And if we withdraw from that, then I think that puts the UK in a very dangerous place where basically nobody is going to trust us.
That's what
why would they respect and trust us?
Like a rogue state, because you don't honor your international agreements, because really, I mean, they are written down in law, but at the end of the day, they need to be enforced. So you have to accept that this party is going to be bound by that element of the contract, and we're going to be bound by that element of the contract.
To me, Denise, it's really fascinating, because it was the whole premise of why I brought my first court case in Article 50, because what they were trying to do was override an international treaty, which was Article 50 is actually international law. So we're almost back to square one, which what this government repeatedly tries to do is it wants to push through its own agenda, but then the rule of law gets in its way. So it decides to either trash it or override it. And that's not how people respect us. We have to be a country that respects the rule of law, because that then impacts on our international reputation and the way we are viewed on the world stage.
But just going back to the question about the need to reinvigorate this whole debate, it's because of the failings that are happening at the moment. Because I mean, this morning we had one of the whip's office, or one of the people in, I've got it down somewhere else, but essentially he resigned because he was involved in impropriety. Basically, it appeared to be a sexual assault, against two people in a private club. Then we have the Prime Minister, who was in receipt of a fine because he broke his own COVID rules. And you just seem to have a constant flurry of what I would call, it's not, obviously the fine is criminal, but it's just this constant erosion of, we're just constantly very much pushing towards the very gate. It doesn't really matter too much, but let's see how much more further we can go. And I think all of that is eroding people's trust every day, because people are, there was an interview with the Prime Minister on Monday, and the first question is, you're just a liar, basically. And I think that's a really bad place for our politics to be. He's the leader, and he's seen as untrustworthy and constantly disingenuous, and invariably creating these wars where people are polarized so that he can then just address a very narrow narrative.
I think he's disrespecting the office of Prime Minister and of leaders. I mean, leaders should be operating at the highest standards, not the lowest standards. And it reflects badly on us as a country. People around the world, when I travel, literally we're a laughing stock now. How did we get to this place? But there's a much bigger issue, because these stories are going to be coming, we've got somewhere near to 60 MPs cross-party, the majority are Conservatives, but it is cross-party, of 60 MPs who are being investigated or have been found guilty for sexual depravity, We've had young staffers from the Conservative Party back in May writing to the Prime Minister to say they are experiencing on a daily basis sexual harassment, misogyny, bullying. This is young men, gay men as well. This is young men as well as women. And saying that, you know, when we call them out, when we say anything, we're told they're rumors and we must ignore it and it's just a bit of fun. I mean, that's coming from the top. So we have a Prime Minister who's setting a tone that is full of chaos, and it has no, there's a void in our politics. There are no values, there are no principles, there's a lack of trust. I mean, trust is on the floor. I see that going around the country with our party, with True and Fair. It is the first thing people say. They not only do they not trust them, but it's them and us. The them and us thing is everywhere. That, you know, why should we listen? And that's really damaging to us as a country, because we need politicians. We're going into some of the toughest things our country is going to have to face. This cost of living crisis is not going away anytime soon. We're going to go into recession. We're going to go into 0% GDP. We've got instability in the Ukraine and around the world. The geopolitical plates are moving. We've got so many things. We have one thing I'll say that really has shocked me to my core, traveling around the country, is I will put my hand up and say, I didn't actually know how broken our country was. I didn't realize the levels of poverty. I didn't realize the housing that people are living in. I didn't realize how our young people felt. I am shocked to the core that this is the country that we live in. We have got to do so much better than this. And yet politicians are, you know, they're about, you know, the whole oxygen is being taken up by power preservation, looking after themselves, and actually defending the indefensible. And that has got to stop. There is a rot in Parliament and it's got to be cleaned out.
I'm not in disagreement with you, but I just wanted to get your thoughts on the Brexit dividends and what they potentially are. Because for me, from what I can understand, the dividends are being felt by manufacturers in Northern Ireland because they are seeing increased trade. But I'm not sure how many other people are seeing those dividends. And I wondered if you could maybe give your thoughts on what the Brexit dividends were or weren't.
So far, there are none. And I have to say that, again, we have to be completely honest about this. Those people, I'm not a person who just talks about, you know, what's the point of crying over spilt milk? We've actually got to get on with this. And there is no plan and there's no listening. Every single sector has staff issues. There are problems in supply chain. Our GDP is being, you know, for the last quarter of 2021, there was a £31 billion hole in GDP directly related to Brexit. Even Lord Frost has said there's a 5% downgrade in our export because of Brexit. So this idea that you can't separate it from COVID, it is nonsense. And, you know, to say we're not doing any impact studies, there are enough studies out there that show, even the Office of Budget Responsibility has said that the impact over the long term is going to be significant. So how do we limit the damage? That's where we've got to start. So we have to start listening to sectors.
People don't accept there's any damage, because I was looking at there was an article in The Guardian, and it said that exports to the EU are down by 14% since 2021. So, but if you can't even agree, this is what I think part of the where the politics, in my view, is broken. Because if you can't even agree that this is the reality, then you end up arguing around the periphery. And I think that's a lot of what happens. And that's why you're getting the NIP bill through, because people want to be right. They don't want to be on the wrong side. And clearly, the wrong side is damaging the poorest people, because we're really feeling it.
You know, they won. So we can't revisit Brexit. Brexit won. They won. The Leavers won. We left. We're all Brexiteers now. We are. Our entire country is a Brexit country. By default, yes, we are. That is where we are. So how do we actually deal with this? And that's where there's no grown-up conversations, because there's too much political capital. They're campaigning still. They're not leading the country. They're campaigners, and they're using it to cover up all their own failings. Because I can tell you, having been part of the the campaign since October 2015, I came across in green rooms, in debates across the country, people on both sides now, this is Leave and Remain, who basically said Leave would not win, so there was no plan. So I can tell you 100% there was never a plan in place for when Leave won. And because of that, we're still suffering from that, because as far as I can see, there still is no plan. What they're trying to do is to divert from the reality of what is going on, look at winning another election perhaps, and then just, deciding that it's then up to them to do what they want to do. And the only way out I can see is to lower our standards, to lower our tariffs, to actually damage our country. And that's the reality. We have to have an open conversation. I mean, every sector is suffering from staffing issues because of Brexit. And what they don't tell you in the news, and the people who voted for, to reduce immigration because of Brexit, is that the first time in our history, our immigration has just hit 1 million people coming in, but they're not coming in from Europe. They're coming in from India, from Nigeria, from all other countries. And I'm just to be funny, Denise, when I was up, I was doing one of the events, and I remember being shouted at by all these people saying, oh, people like you won't be here, all you foreigners, you'll be gone. And I said very calmly, no, there'll be more people who look like me. And that's exactly what has happened.
I think people are, that point about being in campaigning mode. Can I just bring you back to that? So do you think that the way in which the current Prime Minister is addressing questions around the Ukraine, I mean, he's pledged £1 billion, I think it was yesterday. I think there was some consideration I heard on the radio that Mr. Zelensky would be coming here. Do you think he's using the Ukraine conflict so he can do this Churchillian exercise and look very statesmanlike, without having to address the problems here? Because we talked a moment ago about the cost of living. We talked also about, we're going to come on to, I've got a question about housing and what your party would do about those questions, but housing for young people is a huge, well, not just young people, but you said the poverty. So do you think that he is effectively using the Ukraine as a way not to have the examination on domestic matters?
I think there's two things. One is Ukraine is a massive problem. It's a war on the door of Europe and us, and we should be incredibly worried about it. And this war is not going to go away anytime soon. No, it's not. And so, we're in this for the long term.
6 weeks ago or 8 weeks ago either. It's not like a new conflict. It's been going on for some time.
No. And also we have lots of problems. We have the disgraceful way we left Afghanistan, and the fact that we didn't have any plan there. These are serious international geopolitical problems that need to be resolved in a very diplomatic, with skill and diplomacy, and neither Boris Johnson nor Liz Truss are showing that. They are actually trying to make political capital out of this, and it's very worrying, because if you listen to the fact that if this is a war in Ukraine that's going to go on for a long time, if we keep on sending our armaments, we actually, even Germany has said this and we've said this, we don't actually have that much ourselves. We can't keep on supplying everybody else, ad infinitum, when we have actually neglected funding our defense in our country. We've stripped our Ministry of Defense of funding for years and years now, for the whole 12, 13 years now. So there are serious problems here, and they are making light of it. And that's what I think is terrible, because these are serious situations that we have to have real grown-up politicians and people with real statecraft actually at the table talking about. The thing I do find, though, and I know with Boris, which I find amusing, and I did actually check this the other day, is that when there's real trouble at home, he gets on a plane and flies somewhere. Yes. And think of the cost of that.
That conference, the Northern Powerhouse conference, the same day that he was shaking hands with Zelensky, and essentially, and that was before the by-elections where they got a real bloody nose. So to me,
so what he does is, Denise, he jumps on a plane, and just think about the cost of that to our budget when we're going through a cost of living crisis. Just think of the environmental damage of doing that every time. But also, when he goes, not only if he doesn't fly away, it doesn't matter if it's in another country here, he always turns up in a kiddie's classroom coloring. Have you noticed this? He actually is normally at a table talking to little 7 and 8 year olds or 5-year-olds or coloring in every time he's in trouble.
That's the key audience for his messaging.
I mean, honestly, check it out. You'll see every time he's in big trouble, he's in a classroom reading a children's book or doing coloring in. It's the most bizarre thing I've seen.
Those crayons that you used to give to your kids. It's the power of Crayola. It just line for different things. So, okay. The Headley Highlight Show is your weekly political talk show for news, views and conversation with me, Denise Headley. This is an interactive show and it involves all of you. Please retweet and share in all of your social media networks using the hashtag The Headley Highlight, The Big Questions or The Headley Headlines. You can follow me on Twitter at Denise_Headley. You can email me at deniseheadley.com@gmail.com. You can follow me on TikTok at Denise_Headley900, or you can DM me as well if you want to speak anonymously. The Headley Highlight Show is written, produced, and edited by me, Denise Headley, and it is a splendiferous production. If you miss any of the show, scroll down my feed and catch it on the replay. But I'm conscious, with the Zoom, they just tend to just run out very quickly. So I just want to ask you, so tell me about your political party, because the first thing when you agreed to be my guest, after I did my whole, fangirl thing, I started looking at all the links, and I saw that you had the Vote True and Fair Party. And what I found a little concerning or sad was that I see so many other political parties having space. I didn't know that you were even in the field, and I felt upset about that. So I wish to address my upset, because I think something like a new political party is always very important, but also the fact that it's you, Gina, I think is one of the reasons we're not hearing too much about it. So tell me about
it's very interesting, because I always said I would never become a politician. I was never going to go into politics.
I was a politician. I did 3 terms for Enfield.
Yeah, I know, but I always said I wouldn't. I thought I could be better, being free of that shackle, if you like. I'm sorry to say that, but, being outside. But when I read, for me, the last straw was reading the draft of legislation that was going before Parliament, and the elections bill in particular last summer. And so I thought, I either now leave or I stand. I mean, I got to that point where I'm now so concerned about the future of our country that we have to do something. And I don't believe the main parties have the resolve, because actually the system benefits them, to have the resolve to push to where we need to go, because we need new politics for a new era. The issues coming down the line in digital revolution, the aging of our population, the commodity crisis across the globe. I was going to say the commodity issues are linked with climate, the mass movement of people linked to climate, the rise of the right across the globe. We have huge problems, and I do not believe the political system is fit for that, because the machinery of government has never been modernized, really. We've had this good chap, we'll get good chaps in and they'll sort out everything. It's so naive. So, our party's firmly about, cleaning up politics. How I don't need that message should be everywhere because of what we're seeing. I should be invited. We should be everywhere.
You should be on every time I see a lot of these political programs, I see particular people from different, especially the right-wing leaning new parties. They get all the airtime and they're given opportunities.
Yeah, and also because another main strand of us is fighting corruption and transparency. And I popped up from nowhere, people think, with my 2 court cases. But I've been a campaigner for 30 years. I've been fighting corruption in lots of sectors. I've done it in my financial services sector, in charity sector, I've pushed for it in special needs. I've been a campaigner for a very long time. So my skills are in place to do this, is what I feel. I have something to offer and people can choose. But it's been very interesting, the reaction. When we launched, because we did a soft launch in February, and the right-wing press, all the press were like, nobody. No. Well, what's really interesting? No, the press was, nobody turned up. So it was a time when we were still abiding by the rules. Okay. So we had 10 to 13 people, because Denise, it's good to have 3 people you're looking at. Not one person asked us how many people are online. We had over 800 people online, but nobody asked about that. And now I'm being told, oh, we can't get you on because you're a small party. Look what happened with Farage. We learned our lesson. We can't have you on. Yeah, but you're having all the right-wing parties on.
Look, and that's he was actually on Question Time talking about being marginalized. He was on there practically, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times in a year, and then kept saying, I am being silenced and I'm being marginalized. And
but don't do it, Denise. We have, so what I wanted to do, because it's difficult in the first past the post system to start a new party.
Exactly.
So what I wanted to do is, we launched February, and we've been going around the country testing and talking and listening to people. So I've done 23 tours in 2 and a bit months. I know.
Wow.
it's exhausting.
But
But
a podcast out, Gina, because you can speak to a lot of people, you know, in a much wider way. Because to me, I love radio, and audio is great, and people can download because people are interested. I mean, the fact that you have a party, and not only that, you're going around the country, you're listening, you are new. There was at one point, we did have a conversation about PR in this country, but that, you know, we had the referendum and it died a death. But I think, you know, the idea,
the public's in a very different place now.
it is very different.
76% of people want proportional representation. They know that our first past the post system is completely broken and is completely unfair. It cheats voters. If you think that, you know, the Conservatives in 2019 got 43.6% of the public vote, but they ended up with, you know, nearly 57% of the seats in Parliament. That's not a fair reflection of how people vote. So that's just one of the things that need to change. But we are now at the stage, we know what people want. We've listened to them. We haven't come from this thinking this is what we want. So we've listened, and we literally are launching. So 2 weeks time, we launch our candidate selection program. We've seen the seats that we've already done all the data mining on the seats. Social media, we don't have to be in public media. Social media is where we are at and where we're talking to lots of people.
You're going to field candidates. That is
yes.
fabulous.
Oh, no, I'm standing myself. So we're definitely going to.
Oh my word. I'm so happy to hear that.
So we had to do groundwork. I don't like doing things without doing my homework. So we've done the marketing, the soft turning around the country. So we make some announcement pre-summer, and then come September, we're on it. We're literally pushing every button.
I am so enthused to hear that, because really and truly, I'm very interested in politics. I'm sure you've worked that out. But obviously, I've seen it from both sides and I've been inside. And I think that, like you're saying, there has to be a fundamental change, because the first past the post system doesn't actually serve the whole country. And that to me,
but Denise, it's even the way policy is made. I mean, I say our slogan is that we're about right and wrong, not right and left. And because that's where we've got to go to in the future. We've got to start thinking about
the middle
different types of policy growing. We've got, and policy has to be about long-term sustainable, addressing the issues we have. I mean, there are so many things are broken. We have to start looking at education, at the economy, at you know, looking housing. You were talking about, you know, it is. But this is not just tinkering. We have to have radical reforms, because we've neglected, both from a point of view of real intellectual thinking but also funding of our services in our country. We've been running it on the cheap for 13 years.
And then we've also had an austerity program, and we've had an increase in the transfer of public money into private companies to deliver particular types of, you know, public services, and they're not necessarily done very well. I mean, you know, look at the whole track and trace. That whole system to me was a complete waste of public money. And now we actually see the COVID explosion that's happening all over again. What's the role of track and trace in that, given that it has
corruption is rife in public. We have to be tough on business and corruption, tough in public sector of corruption, tough on institutional corruption. The waste, you know, money is tough. When money is tough, waste should not be happening. And the social contract is we work hard and we pay taxes. The amount of our taxes that are being wasted is criminal, and we've got to address that. So it's not an issue of just, of course, we may need more money, but, you know, we shouldn't have the waste that's there. And it is everywhere.
To me, there seems to be like this notion that we are the people who we put the money in, and then we just don't get the outcomes that we're looking for. We don't have, you know, the right type of services. We don't have that, and then we have this erosion of the structures locally, which engaged us democratically. I mean, when I was a councillor, there used to be lots of area forums, there used to be lots of community groups, and okay, they weren't always effective, but there was a space. And now it just seems that all of that is imploded even more, and we're left in this kind of, you know, it's almost like, I think people, they're not that they're demoralized, I think demoralized, yes, but there's also a sense of it's really hard to change things. And I think that's part of the Brexit reason why we ended up voting for Brexit, because people felt, rightly or wrongly, they were able to make a change using the franchise that they have, which was the vote.
I mean, I'd say that only people who are insane would have voted to hurt themselves or their families. So people were voting for change.
They will.
And now where people are, I see we have a country who I say are carrying a burden. There's a cloud over people, and we need to give people hope. We need to show them a vision.
Yeah.
And so I'm not interested in the politics of the old or the old systems or the old right and left. I'm only interested, how do we get a new vision? How do we start planning? For me, I'm a business person. I look at the problem, I look at the solution, and then look at the strategy of how we're going to deliver that. And so that's the mindset I'm bringing to the party, into our politics, is to say, I like experts, I like data, I like speaking to the receivers of products, consumers, I like communities.
We like feedback.
Yeah, we like feedback, and we want to bring that, because you can't do it all. If you try and do things in a way that only benefits one group against the other, what you do is you're just basically feeding division. And so, and it has to be about fairness. And if you explain, I'll tell you one thing else I've discovered around the road, or talking to politicians who don't like what I'm doing, is I say that we have to be honest with people. People are not stupid. People feel things are wrong, okay? And I keep being told, oh, but you can't tell people the truth. They won't like it. They won't vote for you. I'm like, we have to stop taking people for fools. I am so fed up of hearing politicians of all parties saying to me, we can't tell people the truth. Of course you should be telling people the truth.
It's not just about the truth. It's about the management of if you think about it as almost like it's an advert, you need to make sure that you're online with the advert. You're saying the right things that fit the advert. If you start saying, look, when we cut austerity, we actually knew that we were going to lock so many people off of the benefits basket. No one's going to...
I agree with
that's
you.
What you did, but you don't want to say that. You don't want to actually point out that you effectively had policies which made the poorest even poorer, because you then want to come back and say, well, we've given you a small rise, or we haven't taken away the triple lock, but we're going to take it away in 4 years' time. So you're trying to constantly create an idea, and you're constantly selling the idea, not necessarily the reality. And I think that's the point that they mean when they talk about truth.
I mean, the thing is, there are ways of telling truth. You have to do it in a way that doesn't depress or alarm. So you have to tell the story in a way that you bring people along with you, and you manage their expectations, and you show them how you're going to change things for them. And I think that's absolutely right.
Way.
You have to do. I mean, there is a lot that we can do, and this is the thing we want to do. I don't want to dwell on the problems. Everyone knows the problems. When we talk about politics, it is completely broken. It's rotten. There is no rules in Westminster. Who holds an MP to account? It wouldn't happen in any other walk of life.
Exactly.
They shouldn't be.
A lot of those behaviours, if you were in the job, you would be sacked for gross misconduct.
Oh, gone. You'd be gone. You're gone. And I mean, ministerial start, what we've published on the True and Fair website, things like ministerial code being put into law. Straight away, you've got contract. They don't even, I have to say, I didn't realize this, but they don't even have to hold surgeries. They don't have to have a local office. There is nothing that an MP is required to do by law. It's extraordinary. They literally can make it up as they go along. And yet they represent us, and they're being paid by us.
Well, I think, put it this way, I do honestly think that given that we love competition for votes is also very important. So I'm really keen to see more new political parties take hold, especially ones that are, as far as I'm concerned, they're far more modern and steeped in what I would call a mindset of that's progressive, and it's not seeking to just argue on the same grounds that we've been arguing for years and years and years. Let me ask you one quick question, because we've only got 2 minutes before this thing decides to say thank you and good night. in terms of addressing inequality, because we know that inequality has grown hugely under the current administration, what would you say are your key issues there? And then are you guys preparing a manifesto?
We are preparing a manifesto, and one of the things, housing, for me, just to give you 3 top lines.
Yes.
I think right to accommodation should be put into law. I'm a strong believer in that. I mean, we've got a very detailed housing policy that's going to be very radical. Education. If we don't have an educated country, we have a third of 16-year-olds who are not getting basic GCSE maths and English. A third. How are we supposed to be competing in the world when we have a failing educational system that is built on the past, does not inspire children for the future, is not giving them the skills for the future, and it's not prepared for the fact that we're going to have a lifelong learning. So education, education, education. It's so important. And economy, we have to have a growth economy. You know, one of the other things that we already know from Brexit is it's not just the lack of the impact on trade and exports, but also we already know that there's a 17% downturn in foreign investment. We're not seen as being a trustworthy country. We need foreign investment. We need to have unlocked green industries. Our economy is not working.
Gina, we're going to get cut off. It's been an absolute pleasure. I will email your office. Thank you from your #1 fangirl on the Headley Highlight Show.
Pleasure.
Thank you. It was an absolute pleasure speaking to you. Thank you, Gina.
Take care, Denise, and keep watching space.
Definitely. Start your own Twitter space. I'll come. I'll be a co-host. Bye. Thank you, Gina.
Bye.
Bye.